Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners, to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. It is a Tuesday edition of the show. Want to say hello to all the Pewter people that are filing in as we get underway this afternoon, as we got a fun one in store, a little hypothetical, a little fantasy football for you as we take a trip down memory lane, talking about former Buccaneers who could help the current Bucs team going into the 2024 season. The Bucs certainly are not perfect by any means. So if you could pluck a player from maybe their first Super Bowl winning team or another all-time great that wore either the red and pewter or maybe even the creamsicle, if they could play for your 2024 Bucs, who are you picking? We're going to break it all down on today's show in an exciting exercise. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is the face that runs the place at pewterreport.com, SR Scott Reynolds. Scott, you've covered a fair amount of these guys in your career that we're going to talk about today. How are you doing?
Doing good. Yeah, this is kind of a fun topic because it's old school, but at the same time, it's also, I think, for maybe some of the younger fans, a really good midsummer history lesson, just in terms of
for sure
of what some of these players did. Now, we don't have any clips of these players, any highlights, but you can find them all over YouTube. The players we're going to be talking about are some of the greatest players and in Tampa Bay history, and maybe a couple of surprises as well. So a couple of ground rules. We did two things. Number one, because we're talking about today's Buccaneers and this team in 2024, one of our ground rules was we were not going to use any player that has been a teammate of this current team. For example, there's a glaring hole at left guard, Matt. I mean, who would be a logical pick who just played left guard and, I don't know, maybe won a Super Bowl or went to the Pro Bowl before he retired?
Yeah, I'm thinking Ali Marpet would be a great look for this current offensive line.
Yeah, but at the same time, he's disqualified because he played with some of these players. So these are older players from yesteryear, some legends, and I think a couple surprises we have in store for people. Then the second rule was this requires a little bit of an imagination because this is fantasy football, folks, in its purest sense. There's no wagering on this. There's no highs and lows, etc. in terms of hitting yardage and pass attempts and things like that. This is true fantasy football, meaning use your imagination. The players we're talking about, imagine them in their prime playing for this current Buccaneer team. So Correct. You might have seen Mike Allstott on the cover graphic. I believe Mike, since I'm 52, Mike's either 50 or 51. I'm a year older than Mike, maybe two. So we're not talking about the 50-year-old A-Train.
Yeah, current day Mike Allstott. I don't know how much he'd really be able to help the Buccaneers. But yeah, exactly. The A-Train in his heyday, for sure. Yes. Obviously, we'll talk about him and what kind of fit he would have. I also think it's important that we really tried to specify it with guys that played a chunk of their careers with the Buccaneers. For example, like Darrelle Revis played one season with the Bucs. It would be kind of cheating to say, "Oh, let's get Prime Revis," in the secondary for the Bucs.
Yeah. That just, or maybe replace Baker Mayfield with Tom Brady. Like, we're not going to do that, for example, right?
Yes. The other thing, teammate, so he breaks several criteria.
Exactly, and then I think maybe the last bit of rules here that we're going to adhere to is just out of respect. It would be easy to say, Leroy Selman as an edge rusher. Leroy, may he rest in peace, has passed away. So we're talking about players that are former players that are still with us here on earth, not necessarily up in heaven. So, no sacrilege to Leroy Selman. It was a tragedy that he died so early. But, at the same time, great to see that he was alive for his induction into the Bucs Ring of Honor, for the creamsicle day that happened in 2009. He got to be a part of the first throwback game with the creamsicles back in 2009. And then, of course, all the wonders that he did in starting the USF football program.
Yes.
Just an absolute legend out there in Oklahoma, former number one overall pick, obviously. And then what he was able to do here in the Tampa Bay area with the Buccaneers first, and then with USF. I mean, the gentleman has an expressway named after him for very good reason. He's an absolute legend, not just in the sports scene, but just as a person as well.
Yeah, he has a statue. He's got an expressway named after him. We're certainly not downplaying his impact in the Tampa community and the Bucs community. We just tried to mix it up as much
Yeah,
as we possibly can. We didn't want to just take all players from the first Super Bowl winning team, because that would be easy to do as well. So
yeah,
we tried to like even it out as much as we possibly
yeah,
could. And obviously people would be upset that Leroy Selman's not on this list. Understandably so.
yeah,
He's arguably the greatest edge rusher that the Bucs have had
yeah.
in their history. But yeah, that's just kind of the criteria / ground rules of what we've done, so everyone can kind of understand as we go along with the show.
Yeah, and some Buccaneer legends, and also a guy that certainly I think was on his way to being a really good Buccaneer until he decided to be a rapper and not take his career too seriously. But Mike Williams, but certainly Vincent Jackson, stand-up community guy,
Yeah.
great receiver here, and then Leroy Selman, we just talked about him. So yeah, the Buccaneers have lost some good ones, as have other franchises. It's just a part of life. But Matt, this was another great topic, and away we go. Should we start on offense or defense today?
Well, defense wins championships.
Oh,
You're
I
a
like
defensive
that, man.
guy,
Yeah,
and the Bucs, even though their offense was great on their 2020 Super Bowl winning team, this Buccaneers franchise was built around defense starting off.
true.
So let's go with the defense, and then we'll work our way to the offense and
I
special
love it.
teams as well.
I love it. Exactly. So for those listening to the audio version, we're going to name all of the players real quick, and then we'll dive into them in terms of the analysis part of our show. But so these Tampa Bay legends can help today's Bucs. How about cornerback Rondé Barber at nickel? I know this team just drafted Tyke Smith. Matt, you and I both like him. The
Yeah.
kid out of Georgia. I think he's going to be a playmaker. But I mean, come on, the greatest nickel cornerback of all time. He's the real playmaker, right? He's a Hall of Famer. Number two, imagine a defensive tackle rotation, right? Logan
Oh my
Hall not
goodness.
really panning out, but what if you had Warren Sapp and Vita Vea next to each other, and you rotate Kalijah Cansey in, and then your nickel rush is Sapp and Kalijah Cansey when you want to go speed, or it's Sapp and Vita Vea when you want to go with some power inside. Imagine the quarterback killer playing next to Vita Vea. That's crazy. Number three, Simeon Rice, the sack master. You talk about an edge guy playing outside linebacker opposite Yaya Diaby. Whew, I mean, say your prayers, quarterbacks. It's going to be over real quick. And then replacing Devin White and KJ Britt with Hardy Nickerson, fiery inside linebacker who can hit, sack, and cover. Hardy could do it all, brought a lot of intensity and kind of a badass nature to the Bucs defense. So between Sapp and Nickerson, boy, you've got some real edge right there on your Bucs defense if you don't have it already. But Matt, let's start with Rondé Barber. I mean, that seems like an upgrade right there. No offense to Christian Izien.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we're talking about one of the greatest defensive backs of all time, not even just for the Buccaneers, but in the NFL, and rightfully so. Rondé finally got his call to Canton last offseason, or right before the start of the season, which you were in attendance for, Scott, which was really cool. I almost think, and obviously we can kind of rattle off all the accolades he has, whether it's 3 first-team All-Pros, being the Bucs all-time leader with 47 interceptions, being in the 40-20 club with interceptions and sacks. But I also kind of think of, because you mentioned like Tyke Smith getting drafted, how great of a mentor Rondé Barber would be for Tyke Smith. Because, Scott, let's remember, Levante David briefly was teammates with Rondé Barber, and he still talks to this day about how important Rondé was to him, and he doesn't even play the same position.
That's right.
So for Rondé to have that effect on Levante David, who now obviously has paid it forward, if you will, with his leadership and what he means to the current day defense. I mean, Rondé just roaming around anywhere. Let's remember, like, Rondé did move to safety at the end of his career too. Can you imagine Todd Bowles dialing things up where, hey, Antoine's going to blitz, but that's okay. We're going to put Rondé Barber at safety for like this one play. Jason Light has said before that he views the nickel defense as kind of the Bucs' base defense,
Yeah.
there would be no question if Rondé is your slot corner that it's going to be a base defense
That's
in
right.
the nickel with Rondé on the field. Because then the options are limitless. If you want to blitz Winfield, great. You want to blitz Rondé? I mean, nobody better can do it as a defensive back. And then, hey, you got the hammer and Jordan Whitehead to do a little bit of everything too.
Yeah.
We talked about the Bucs wanting to get better with a 4-man pass rush, 5-man pass rush, depending on what package they're in. If you had Rondé in the slot, yeah, they would try to pick on Zion McCollum or whatever it may be. But even if you didn't have Warren Sapp and say it was only Rondé on this team and no other legends, I mean, man, that pass rush would get home even more because Rondé's taken away so much.
That's right. No, you're right. And the other thing too is I think he would provide some insurance at outside corner, right? We saw Bryce Hall, and jury's still out on him. I mean, he got torched a little bit at the second practice for sure in minicamp, and we'll see how he fares during the training camp, especially when the pads come on. He's more of a physical corner, and I get that. Rondé does not have ideal Todd Bowles cornerback size by any means. He likes those long, lean kind of guys on the outside that have some muscle and some length to their game. But at the same time, Rondé Barber, he's a fearless dude. He went up against the likes of Randy Moss, Jake Reed. Those are some 6'4" receivers with the Minnesota Vikings. Chris Carter, I want to say is 6'2", 6'3". Herman Moore was not Megatron, right? But Rondé also went up against Megatron, Calvin Johnson. So you're talking about a 6'4" Herman Moore, and then a 6'5" Calvin Johnson. He's gone up against some big receivers and held his own because of great technique, positioning, football IQ. He can time the pass breakup. He can time the interceptions. So he gives Todd Bowles some flexibility, as you said, to play safety, to play nickel, and also in a pinch, if he's a better outside corner than Bryce Hall, then if there's an injury to Zion McCollum or to Jamel Dean, then you have Rondé Barber in his prime as your outside starting corner. And remember, I know we use the term nickel corner for Rondé, but he really was a starting cornerback in Monty Kippen's base defense outside. And he played a lot of outside corner. He was not just in the slot, but when he was in the slot in those nickel packages, boy, he was deadly because he could come with the sack. He could make the tackle underneath. And of course, he could, maybe pick 6 Donovan McNabb from the slot as well.
You took the words right out of my mouth, because the other thing I was going to add about Rondé is that he brings a fierceness to this defense that maybe is lacking a little bit, that can kind of just put them over the edge. And he brings a little swagger and confidence. Yeah. And the Donovan McNabb thing was one of those moments I was going to bring up, because he was on this show, friend of the program, Rondé Barber.
Yeah.
And we asked him about, like, who's your favorite quarterback to intercept? And right away, he said Donovan McNabb. Yeah. And we kind of joked. He's like, oh, we had great chemistry. We got along so well. And, I mean, you see the most historic interception in Buccaneers history against the Eagles in the NFC Championship game in Philadelphia, doing his signature celebration. It was that, and then at his Hall of Fame speech, he said something where he was, kind of hyping himself up. I don't remember it specifically, but he had some words that was very in his own Rondé way of being like, I deserve to be here. And he wasn't like calling out people like, screw you for taking so long to put me in. But he knew he deserved to be there. And he kind of said it in a polite and a respectful way, but also showing that, he's got that swag. He's got that confidence. I mean, we talk about like Deion Sanders, who was the ultimate like primetime show. Rondé was a little bit of his own show, never like taking away from the team, but just showing such self-confidence in himself that I think would really exude onto the other Bucs defenders, especially the young defenders too. I
agree. You mentioned Deion Sanders, right? I think Deion Sanders was a showboat, and deservedly so. He backed up his talk, right? But he was a showboat. Rondé Barber was a showman, and the difference is he just put on a show, right? He didn't have to talk. He let the actions speak louder than words. And then again, as you pointed out, he was always famous for pointing to that nameplate, that Barber nameplate on the back of his jersey. So, why not Rondé Barber to help the Buccaneers secondary, right? Let's go back to the list here and look at the next player. We've got Warren Sapp. Again, Tampa Bay, we saw what life was like without Kalijah Kancey for the first 4 games. We also saw Vita Vea miss a couple games last year, including that Buffalo game on Thursday Night Football. And so having another defensive tackle is just paramount, right? And you look at what Washington did in the second round of this particular draft. They've got Jonathan Allen, former Pro Bowler. They've got Deron Payne, former Pro Bowler. And then they draft Johnny Newton from Illinois, St. Petersburg native, who the Bucs were very high on, right? And they chose him close to the top of the second round. Why? Because you want to have no drop off inside with that pass rush with those defensive tackles. And so Warren Sapp really obviously taking the place of Logan Hall, right, as that defensive tackle there. And of course, I'm not going to disrespect Warren. He's going to be a starter alongside of Vita Vea. Kalijah Kancey, though, boy, what an understudy to have to learn from a guy like Warren Sapp, or I should say to get to learn from a guy like Warren Sapp, who just had the elite quickness and speed and strength, and was not a big defensive tackle, right? He was about 300 pounds. And, you know, he was bigger than John Randall, who was probably more in tune size-wise with a guy like Kalijah Kancey. But, you know, Sapp's not a Vita Vea either. He's closer to Kalijah Kancey. So you're talking about a role model for present-day linemen and defensive players in Tampa Bay to learn from. The QB killer, he certainly can bring the fire.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, he's second all-time in Bucs franchise history with 77 career sacks when he played for Tampa Bay. Had that single-season sack record for quite a while until, Shaq Barrett broke it in 2019. Again, another thing I think of, and obviously like what he means to the defense is fantastic, but I keep thinking about how these players, whether it's Rondé and Tyke Smith or Warren Sapp and Kalijah Kancey, but even Warren Sapp, like how much better he would make the Bucs interior offensive line in training camp. Like, can you imagine Graham Barton, who's going to have to go up against Vita Vea in training camp? But, Vita Vea, while he is a team leader, is a little more soft-spoken, a little more joking, playing around.
I think what you're saying, Matt, is Warren Sapp would make Graham Barton not just physically tough, but mentally tough with the abuse he would give him.
Very mentally tough if he didn't rip his head off. But I mean, with Warren Sapp, you're immediately getting. I mean, he was a defensive player of the year. That's kind of tough to do for a defensive tackle. I mean, I know we saw Aaron Donald do it years later, but a defensive tackle that consistently gets to the quarterback is very hard to find. The Bucs are kind of getting it now with Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey. But to your point, like with Kancey getting injured last year, could you imagine if he could just take his time? I mean, who knows if he rushed back for, really, first of all, to play against the Vikings because he got injured in that game. But even if he didn't have to come back for that game against the Lions, maybe he was ready by then. If you had Vita Vea and Warren Sapp, we saw what Vea did with Ndamukong Suh, but now we're talking about a primetime Warren Sapp. By the way, would have been great to have him last year, but could get some revenge this year. We know Warren Sapp likes playing against the NFC North, and he gets to play against the Lions this season again. Yeah. We've seen before the Bucs sometimes get revenge against their old opponents. They did it with the Eagles this year, losing to them in the regular season and then beating them in the playoffs. You got to think them playing against the 49ers again this season and the Detroit Lions. That's a game Warren Sapp gets the group going, gets everybody fired up more than usual. The pass rush, the run stop, and you have one of the greatest defensive tackles of all time. So, I mean, Rondé Barber and Warren Sapp were easy, like no-brainers to go on this list.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And again, just having a Sapp in his prime, and imagine him in a Todd Bowles defense too, right? Where he was always that three-technique tackle with Monty Kiffin. But where have we seen Todd Bowles utilize his defensive tackles? Sometimes as defensive ends, right? So now you're telling Warren Sapp, hey, we want you to not just abuse centers and guards. We also want you to abuse some defensive tackles too. Sapp also had good hands. He was a tight end in high school. And he also caught some touchdown passes. John Gruden used him as a tight end and some of those goal line packages. And so you talk about maybe dropping a defensive tackle in coverage. Warren Sapp would be the kind of guy that would actually get an interception, and probably more so than a Vita Vea, right? But just the ways that Todd Bowles could use Kalijah Kancey, Vita Vea, and Warren Sapp as chess pieces around that defensive front. And I think Warren would eat that up too. That's one of the reasons why Warren just loved playing for John Gruden was he wasn't just pigeonholed. Hey, I want you to be my 3 technique, man. I'm going to put you on offense, dude. We're going to have the hurricane package, baby, and put you in a tight end like your high school days. And that just Sapp ate that up, and that just made him a Gruden loyalist and just helped energize the team, especially in the dog days of the season, November, December, where your bodies are all beaten up, and Sapp was the fire starter. He was the guy that's like, it's Thursday. Let's get ready to practice and let's do this. And Gruden really appreciated that. And it's all because he gave Sapp more to do. And I think Bowles would certainly tinker around with different ways to use Warren Sapp. And I think that would work out really well.
And even in 2024, he still loves the game. I mean, he would come back to practice and help coach Logan Hall and some of the defensive tackles. He did it with the Washington Commanders as well. And now he's working with Coach Prime in Colorado. It's going to be, helping out that defensive line. That was a struggle for Colorado last season. Really, offensive line and defensive line. Colorado didn't really bring it there. So I'm very excited to see what type of impact Warren Sapp will have as a coach for the Colorado Buffaloes this upcoming season. And you mentioned the energy that Warren Sapp brought to the Buccaneers, even during practice when guys were lagging. I mean, we called Dave Canales the human Celsius for a while, but Warren Sapp might have been the original human Celsius.
That's right.
Of course, Celsius is the official energy drink of the Pewter Report podcast. We always keep the vibes high on this show, and there's awesome vibe flavors from the Galaxy to the tropical, the cosmic, the Astro vibe. The Arctic vibe is my personal favorite. Love that flavor. Love to start my mornings with the Arctic vibe as well. It's a great substitute for coffee if you want something a little bit different to get your day going in the AM. There's no sugar. It's gluten-free as well, these Celsius energy drinks. So if you haven't had Celsius before, or maybe you're in a different area than your usual spot and you want to know where to find a Celsius energy drink, go to the Celsius store locator on their website. You can punch in your address. They'll tell you the closest location where you can pick one up. Might be a Walmart, a Target, a health and fitness store, or your bodega.
Bodega.
And once you keep going to your bodega and you know you love Celsius and you want more and you want to buy it in bulk, you can buy it in bulk over on Amazon. You do it with the subscribe and save. I'd recommend buying the variety pack because there's so many great flavors of Celsius. Variety is the spice of life, so you can try them all out. Head on over to Amazon, have it sent to your place of residence whenever you want. You're in charge. You're the captain. So just make sure you're drinking Celsius energy drinks, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com.
Yeah. Let's continue on with the defense and wrap up this side of the ball, and then we'll talk about the offense as well. And so the fourth name on the list, and I've had the distinct privilege and honor of covering all these guys. So that's how old I am, Matt. I covered Wanda Barber and walked in the door with Orange Sapp and Simeon Rice. Now Hardy Nickerson was already here. He's older than me. So yeah, Hardy Nickerson, man, I tell you, Hardy was intimidating, and I really appreciated his. He was the original Buccaneer when this team was still the Buccaneers. I think Hardy was the guy that was brought in from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
In 1993, he actually set a record for most tackles in a season with 214. That's a record that Derek Brooks and Levante David haven't even close to touching.
Yeah.
And he was a tackling machine. He could cover. He could hit. He could rush the quarterback and get sacks. And he was just that catalyst that served as a good leader. Lynch was kind of coming into his own. Brooks and Sapp came on the scene in 95. And together, that defense just was a bunch of badasses. And Hardy Nickerson was just one of those guys, just flexing, intimidating, and just a menace for other teams. And when the Buccaneers were the Buccaneers, when they were the laughing stock, I mean, if you could, if you're an NFL team and you could schedule one of your opponents for the homecoming game, it would be the Buccaneers. Uh-huh. That's how bad they were. But Nickerson helped change the culture of that. And I remember he came in and picked a fight, I want to say with Keith McCants, I believe, who was a former first-round pick. it was either McCants or Eric Curry, and it was a former first round pick, and it was an edge rusher. It might have been McCants, and because they weren't working hard enough. And so Nickerson just came in as the sheriff and just laid down the law. And I guess they were like, as the legend has it, the player was not working out hard enough in the weight room. And Hardy just said, like, either start lifting or get out of here. And the guy's like, you talking to me? And Nickerson's like, yeah. And fists were flying. And all of a sudden it became Nickerson's locker room. And I think that's that's where the transformation, came. Now, this is a good legitimate question here. Matthew Sam says, Derek Brooks. We went with a true middle linebacker here in Hardy Nickerson because really Levante David plays that Derek Brooks role. And so out of deference and respect to Levante David, he's not worth replacing. He's a damn good player,
right?
As it is. Just like, for example, we didn't call on John Lynch. Antoine Winfield Jr. is just as good of a safety, especially in Todd Bowles' scheme. And I'm not sure Lynch's playing style would translate necessarily into today's NFL. And you just signed Jordan Whitehead, so you really don't need a strong safety as much as you might need a guy to replace Logan Hall in the depth chart, a guy to replace Christian Izzian, that opposite edge rusher to Yaya Diaby. Those were bigger needs. So that's why we left some of these other legends off.
Yeah, 100%. Again, we got to take into consideration the rest of the Buccaneers locker room. And you mentioned John Lynch. I think that's a good example of, you got Winfield, who's the best safety in the league.
Yeah.
And you get that physicality that John Lynch brought, but you get it with Jordan Whitehead. And Whitehead may even be more equipped just in the sense of like playing in today's rules where like John Lynch would have to get way more used to it. If you're picking just like, hey, let's make a Bucs all-time team, obviously Derek Brooks is on that list and is going to be there. So that's why it's a little bit different in this case scenario. We're not just picking the Bucs all-time team. But to get back to Hardy Nickerson, I mean, man, what a career. I know we're talking about specifically with the Buccaneers, but I mean, he first got into the league in 1987 with the Steelers. He played until 2002.
Yeah.
That is such a long career. That is 16 years. 7 with Tampa, 6 with Pittsburgh, 2 with the Jaguars, and he finished his career with the Green Bay Packers. And with the exception of his rookie season in 1987 with the Steelers, he pretty much started throughout. Even with the Packers in 2002, he started 15 of the 16 games that he played in. With the Buccaneers, you want to talk about durability. He only missed 2 games in 1994, and he missed 6 games in 1998. But outside of that, he played 16 games every single season.
Yeah.
The Bucs would love to have that, especially at linebacker this season where you have Francier Dennis, who we're pretty high on, but he's only going into year 2, very little starting experience. KJ Britt was great coming off the bench last year and being a spot starter when everything was going on with Devin White, but he's never started a full now 17-game season. To have that stability, which Levante David has brought for the majority of his career, only missed 2 games last year, a couple games in 2021 as well. That durability and just having a tackling machine where just taking even a little bit of the weight off of the shoulders of Levante David and let Levante kind of freestyle a little bit, which he really hasn't been able to do in a couple of years because of just the chaos that was Devin White at inside linebacker. For all the good he had, the chaos kind of reared its ugly head over the last, I would say, 2 seasons with the Buccaneers specifically. You got another guy, just attitude, but with everyone we kind of mentioned, I know Warren can really like push the buttons a little bit, but whether it was Rondé or Warren, and we'll talk about Simeon Rice momentarily, a lot of these guys bring the fire and brimstone, which you talked about before, an attitude, but again, it was never detrimental to the team. It was never detrimental to the locker room, and in my opinion, it wouldn't be detrimental to this Buccaneers locker room in 2024. I don't think he'd be starting fistfights necessarily. But having a tackling machine, a veteran that just knows what to do day in and day out on relatively a younger Buccaneers team. I know there's a bunch of veterans a couple seasons ago, but now this is a young team. Like they completely revamped and flipped the page in that aspect of it. And Hardy Nickerson, I think, would be a great fit for the Bucs.
I agree. And Nickerson and Sapp, and even to a degree, like you mentioned, Barber, they would bring an edge to this team that really, I don't know that it has on the defensive side like Jason Pierre-Paul is probably the last Buccaneer that truly was that fiery, edge, had edge about him type player. And speaking of edge, what about Simeon Rice? That's our graphic guy there. The sack master, right? We're talking about a guy that you put him opposite Yaya Diaby. The ball's coming out, right? He was a king of getting sacks and sack fumbles. And just showing up on third downs, which was the money down, and a big time player in big time games. Obviously had easily could have been the MVP for the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. You could have gone with, Dexter Jackson won it, but you could have gone with Dwight Smith, who actually had 2 pick sixes, including one in the fourth quarter that was right at the end of the game. He had 1 pick six early, and then for some stupid reason, they have all the media. They collect all the votes at the end of the third quarter. I don't understand.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
It's kind of like the Pro Bowl. It's like, we're going to announce it like with 3 games left in the season. Like, why don't you wait until the end of the season? That's stupid. But the NFL is stupid in general. So they'll do stupid things like, well, we've got to tally up all the votes. Well, why don't you just use the time from when the game is over to bringing out the podium, and then have somebody up in the press box just announce it after the game is over. But Simeon Rice just dominated the Raiders, killed Rich Gannon in that game, and is probably still wanted for murder. But this guy was absolute terror. And I tell you, Matt, in all of my years, the one thing that stands out about Simeon, actually 2 things. Number one, he always had a smile on his face. He always he had like this big grin on his face. He just loved life. Even when they lost, he was dejected, but he had a smile on his face, almost like the Joker, that ever-present smile. And the other thing is easily the best athlete I have ever covered. You talk about an absolute freak of nature. Simeon Rice, this is back when the Bucs had legit 2-a-days, like in full pads, 2-a-day practices. And he would do that. And then at the end of practice, sometimes the strength and conditioning coach would make the players run, laterally across the field of 53 yards and back, right? Just to get some extra conditioning in, like they didn't get enough with 2 full practices in the summer.
Yeah.
But Simeon would take his pads off and would just be in his cleats and, like a ripped shirt or maybe no shirt at all in his pants. And he would be bounding across the field like a gazelle on the Serengeti Plains. I mean, just like boom, boom, boom. Like he could run for days. I don't think he ever got tired. And that's one thing John Lynch told me, is he's just like, I'm not sure Simeon ever got tired. He was in the most supreme athletic shape. And so as good as he was as a pass rusher, as good as he was as a game-changing defender for the Buccaneers, also easily the best athlete I've covered in my almost 30 years of doing this.
I know we said we're talking about Bucs players like in their prime, but if there was anyone on this list that at their current age could probably still play, it would be Simeon Rice. I obviously didn't cover him while he was playing in the NFL, but after the Bucs drafted Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, that year during training camp, Simeon Rice stopped by, and it was a nice surprise. He's not there like all the time, and after he had a conversation with JTS, they met for the first time. It was a cool moment. Hey, edge rusher, the new edge rusher. And Simeon Rice still looked like he could play in the NFL today. I mean, just gigantic arms. Yeah. Still looked like he could play the part. I know you've said in the past, Simeon Rice is like on another planet, or he's an alien.
Simeon.
And I'm just thinking of Simeon on one side, Yaya Diaby on the other.
Oh, gosh,
I mean, there's conversations of, was Yaya Diaby built in a lab? We would have to come up with some type of nickname for the duo of them. I was thinking the Freaks, but Javon Curse has the Freak. Maybe
they're Transformers, Matt. Is really what they are.
Maybe they just be Transformers. But that's the thing we've wanted from Yaya Diaby that Simeon Rice brought is we want him to be that third down threat of every single time the opponent has to go. We got to watch out. Yaya's coming on this play. With Simeon Rice, you have that going. And the 1-2 punch of Simeon Rice and Yaya Diaby, what Simeon Rice did during his time with the Buccaneers, will not be forgotten. I know some of the national audience may forget it, and that's why Simeon hasn't reached the Hall of Fame yet, even though, we've had Tony Dungy on the show who said that Simeon Rice should be a Hall of Famer. And I think many people in the Bucs community feel that way. Yeah. But you got Simeon Rice as your top number 1 edge rusher and Yaya as a number 2 as a compliment just in his second season, and he gets to start a whole year to take that pressure off of Yaya Diaby. Simeon Rice. I mean, obviously all of these picks are great fits for the Buccaneers, but Simeon Rice, I mean, you talked about 50 sacks that the Bucs could attain this year.
Oh gosh,
you might have to put it up to 55 or maybe even 60 with Simeon.
Sapp, Rice, Cansey, Vea, Diaby,
Rondé blitzing, Winfield blitzing.
Winfield blitzing. You got Braswell coming off the edge and as the third guy. I mean, holy smokes, man! That's just too much, right? So, yeah, just good stuff on the defensive side. Enjoyed going down memory lane in my brain as we're talking about this, Matt. It's really good stuff. And now I will say this: my brain at 52 is not what it was, but it didn't feel like a 52-year-old brain, and I'll tell you why. Because I am a patient of Christopher Lugo and the Bay Area Modern Medical Center. And I just got back from a 2-hour workout in the gym, did just about 5 miles on the elliptical and got a great workout in. And the reason why is because my testosterone was low and I'm using testosterone injections, been doing so for just about a year now with Christopher Lugo. Makes a world of difference. The energy I have, it's fantastic for workouts. It gets rid of my mental fog. I'm not crashing on the couch at 8:30 like a loser, like I was before I was doing testosterone. So get the personalized medical care that you deserve. And you're going to get that with Christopher Lugo and Bay Area Modern Medicine Medical Center. If you feel like another number in the waiting room at your doctor's office, then give Bay Area Modern Medical Center in Tampa a try, because they believe that you deserve the personalized care that puts your health and well-being first. Christopher Lugo's got over 24 years of medical expertise. He's a primary care doctor, so he can treat you when you have colds and sicknesses, etc. But that's not all. He specializes in weight loss, anti-aging, hormone replacement therapy, including testosterone treatment. And my wife, Ashley, is also a patient as well. So he treats both men and women. So men, listen up. Testosterone treatments, they can be affordable. I know, because I went to a place before that was ridiculously expensive. Now that's ridiculously cheap. The results are actually even better with Christopher Lugo. So don't let age slow you down. Reclaim your vitality. Get back to feeling great. Turn back the clock. Visit BAMMC.com and explore the range of testosterone and weight loss treatments. And here's the difference. We talked about Christopher Lugo being a primary care physician as well. He practices concierge medicine. What does that mean? It means no more waiting rooms. If your appointment's at 10 o'clock, you go there at 10 o'clock, you're seen at 10 o'clock. And imagine a doctor who doesn't try to rush you out to get to the next person. No, you have a whole hour to go over extensive lab results, discuss your diet and exercise plan, how you're feeling, and also provide some personalized vitamin and supplement recommendations to optimize your health. Same-day appointments also available. That's hard to find, especially when you're sick, at other doctor's offices. But please take my word for it. I'm a very satisfied patient. So is JP Peterson, for example, good friend of mine and colleague. We cannot recommend Bay Area Modern Medical Center enough. So if you're ready to experience healthcare that revolves around you, book your appointment today, BAMMC.com, or give them a call at 844-789-2266. Bay Area Modern Medical Center, where your health is the priority.
Before we get to the offense, we got a super chat talking about the defense. So, of course, you know our rule. If you super chat us, we are happy to talk really about any subject or anything Bucs related that you want to discuss. So, thank you to Architect79 for this $4.99 super chat. Staying with the conversation on Simeon Rice, says it's very frustrating not seeing Simeon Rice get more love in Hall of Fame considerations. BS. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, he's got the numbers. He has the accolades. He has a championship, which I know individual, like Super Bowl championships, it's kind of tough to sometimes say, hey, let's use this in an arguing standpoint where football's a team game. Like, you can get to the quarterback so many times, but if your offense doesn't score any points, really not much that you can do about it. But he does have that Super Bowl. He played very well in the Super Bowl and in the postseason in general. We said before with DeMarcus Ware, he has better stats than DeMarcus Ware, but Ware played for the Cowboys and the Broncos and was consistently on winning teams. Obviously, when Simeon played, he was on winning teams and did get that Super Bowl with the Buccaneers. Yeah, it's frustrating. I don't exactly know why. There have been great edge rushers that have gotten in.
I'll tell you why.
Simeon Rice is in there too.
It's the Bucs bias. There's a bit of a collusion going on. I've talked to Ira Kaufman about this. He is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Hall of Fame voter. He's helped the likes of Barber, Lynch, Sapp, and Brooks get in. And they just don't want to put 5 players from one Super Bowl team in. This is not the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Steel Curtain, where they went to Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl. This is one team, and it was one of the greatest teams of all time, in my opinion, one of the best defenses of all time. But the Hall they're not going to give the Buccaneers 5 players, even though Rice deserves it. I just don't see it happening, and neither does Ira. And that's a shame, because I think Simeon Rice, based upon all the things that you mentioned, deserves to be there. And it's probably not going to happen. And that's a shame, because I do think he has had a Hall of Fame career. They'll keep trying, but he's just not gaining any traction. And I think Lynch getting in ahead of Barber helped Lynch out, because Barber actually had the better resume. And so I think now with those 4 in, Sapp, Brooks, Barber, and Lynch, that's going to be it. And it's unfortunate, but that's just how it is. But let's shift gears, shall we, and talk about well, you know what? Let's talk about tomorrow's show too. Let's get a couple plugs in here. We've got 2 more outstanding Pewter Report podcasts coming your way tomorrow. I'm heading to Lake of the Ozarks for a little bit of a mini vacation, catch up with my old college buddies, Chris and Mike. So Josh Capo is going to be on, and I've already talked to him about the show, and I'm looking forward to watching it. You need to watch it too. Matt and Josh will be talking about the Bucs sack projections and getting in depth in terms of every single player along that defensive front. Josh has come up with the pressure rate, how many pressures they're going to get, how many pass rush snaps they're going to get, and how many sacks they're going to get. So it's going to be a very exciting show as we're inching closer to training camp. That's tomorrow at 4:00, and then on Thursday, Matt and Adam Slavon are going to be talking about the Bucs sleepers to watch in camp. You might have noticed that we've done the last 2 Pewter Report roundtable articles on our sleepers. So we're going to kind of recap that and add a little bit more context to it, and talk about offense and defensive sleepers heading into training camp on Thursday's show at 4:00.
Yeah, I mean, training camp is gonna be here soon, which I'm excited about. I don't know. I feel in years past it's kind of dragged on between OTAs being done. You're kind of just waiting around, and there's not much football stuff. I don't feel that way this year. I don't know why, but I feel like we're kind of moving quicker to football, which is exciting, because once we get to training camp, then college football arrives, a month later, and then the NFL season's here. And, it's always better too, like, especially, this year, there's so many higher expectations for the Bucs than there was the year before, when there's a lot of uncertainty. So I think there's way more optimism this year than there was the year before. And obviously everyone was excited last year too, with kind of the new beginning. So let's get after it.
I think well said. Here's some Tampa Bay legends that can help today's Bucs on the offensive side of the ball. Again, for the audio listeners, we'll rattle these off, and then we'll go in depth with them. We've got tight end Jimmy Giles, Bucs Ring of Honor player that he's a huge receiving threat that could serve as an upgrade at the tight end position.
Yes.
Number 2, center Tony Mayberry. The great thing about this is, and no disrespect to young Graham Barton, but Graham Barton would make a hell of a left guard, right? You talk about an upgrade at left guard. I think he's the second coming Valley Marpet. The team thinks he's a fantastic center, and I think he does have a Pro Bowl future there. But why not bring back Tony Mayberry in his prime? He is actually the most decorated offensive lineman, not named Tristan Wirfs. Before Tristan Wirfs, it was Mayberry who made 3 straight Pro Bowls in 97, 98, and 99. He was the first Bucs offensive lineman to make a Pro Bowl, and having him there at center would allow Graham Barton to really upgrade the left guard position. We got Mike Allstott, the A train. He brings the muscle and the touchdowns to the Bucs ground game. And then a bit of a wild card pick here, because he counts as a wide receiver, but with this new kickoff rule and with the Buccaneers punt return game really lagging, why not bring back Carl the Truth Williams, because he can help this team in so many ways. 5 punt returns for touchdowns, Matt. 5 in his Buccaneer career. Now, he didn't have a kickoff return for a touchdown, but I'll look it up. But he had a pretty healthy average, and he was no Michael Spurlock, but he certainly was a player that was capable of helping with the returns. He's just a slippery guy, great vision, can make you miss. And I think that's what this new kickoff rule is all about.
Yeah, he was on that championship winning team as well. But going back to Jimmy Giles, I mean, looking at his stats, his 34 touchdowns is tied for third most in Buccaneers history. Now he's tied with Chris Godwin, and presumably Chris Godwin is going to beat that. He also had 4,300 career receiving yards with the Buccaneers. Let's remember, Jimmy Giles played for the Bucs, as you see on the picture there in the creamsicle. He played for the Bucs from 1977 to 1986.
Yeah.
Those were not the passing style of offenses that we see in today's NFL or even a decade ago. His highest amount of receiving yards in one season came in 1987. That was 786 yards. That was more than Cam Brate in his highest receiving yards season, which came in when he had 660. That was a couple seasons ago, of course. But I mean, he had, and granted, it's a little apples to oranges because Cam Brate was playing with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and he was never the first option. But for a guy to have a season best of 8 touchdowns as well, which matched what Cam Brate did, doing this in an era where they did not throw the football the way that they do now, I mean, that's just truly incredible what he was able to do with the Bucs. And also had a very long career, played for a couple of teams after as well. But man, I mean, just adding another receiving threat at tight end where you know what you're getting with Cade Otton, but Jimmy Giles would be that true blue red zone threat that the Bucs kind of want from Cade Otton and specifically Payne Durham if he takes the next step this year. I think this is a fun option in a Buccaneers offense that probably needs one more little, security area for Baker Mayfield, and Jimmy Giles obviously would fit this billing.
Here's the other thing too. Imagine catching passes from a quarterback like Baker Mayfield, the numbers that Jimmy Giles would put up, Matt, because Baker completes about 62% of his passes. Doug Williams, who was the quarterback when Jimmy Giles was here, he completed, and I'm not kidding, this might surprise some of y'all, in his 5 years in Tampa, Doug Williams, his average completion percentage was 47.4%. 47.4%. The best year in terms of completion percentage that Doug Williams had in Tampa came in 1982, which was his final season, 53.4%. So imagine having a much more accurate quarterback like Baker Mayfield. We talked about this Liam Cohen offense. It's a 3-by-1, right? 3 receivers and then one tight end isolated. Imagine if that's Jimmy Giles, because Jimmy back in the day could absolutely move and cook linebackers and safeties, and he's bigger than any cornerback. He would create some mismatches, and it would be a nightmare for defenders out there in this Liam Cohen offense. I think he's a tremendous fit.
Yeah, Cohen could dial up a couple of different things for Jimmy Giles. So I like that addition to this team. Looking next on the list, Tony Mayberry, as you said, super, super accomplished with the Buccaneers. Probably the original, offensive lineman to kind of make his name with the Buccaneers. The Bucs have been, pretty lucky, obviously, with Ali Marpet and now Tristan Wirfs. There is kind of a baseline of standout offensive linemen. But Mayberry, you put him in the middle, you kind of secure that interior offensive line for the Buccaneers. But even on top of that, obviously Graham Barton would have to work out at guard, but you fix another question mark that the Bucs going to have going into the season. Yeah. Yes, there's Ben Bredeson and Sua Opeta, but I mean, they're not a sure thing. I mean, Josh Capel, who's going to be on the show tomorrow, he said he kind of views them on the same level as like what Matt Filer brought to the team last year. Yeah. So Bucs fans hearing
hopefully
that,
not,
hopefully not. But Bucs fans hearing that can't be in love with it. Now, will they play better? Sure, certainly. There's that possibility. But you get Mayberry playing at center and then Barton at left guard and Cody Mauch, which congrats to Cody Mauch, just got engaged recently. Yeah, so congrats to him and his fiance. He takes that next step. Barton grows on the left side, and you just have an absolute stalwart in there at center with Mayberry. Really solidifies that offensive line, and of course helps the ground game with Mike Allstott back there too.
That's right. And the thing too is you heard that famous Gene Deckerhoff phrase, Allstott up the gut, right? Well, up the gut was Tony Mayberry paving the way So if the Buccaneers, they want some better results in the running game, Mayberry's the guy to do it. And I think that he had the agility for a bigger guy where he could certainly fit very well in this scheme. And coming from Wake Forest, was one of the most cerebral guys I've ever met in the locker room. A great, fantastic quote, but just super football IQ. He and Graham Barton would go great together, side by side. And just to have that connection between Tony Mayberry and Baker Mayfield, correctly identifying and seeing the defensive front the same way with those audibles and those checks at the line, I think it would be a huge upgrade to this team. And then, you know what? You want to make Graham Barton the heir apparent to Mayberry and slide him over? He's learning from the guy on a down in, down out basis. So I think that would be really something there. Let's skip on down to Carl the Truth Williams. And he provides a spark to Tampa Bay's return game on special teams. And he's also a wide receiver. I mean, he made some pretty clutch catches. It was, for a while, it was third and Williams. They had billboards around town. I think they were Adidas billboards because he was such a clutch third down guy. Now, that's not to take anything away from Chris Godwin, who kind of is that clutch guy for the Buccaneers on third downs. But the thing about Williams that I always appreciated is just his total yardage is actually insane. I think he's got, and I probably should have done the research on this, but when you look at the total number of receiving yards that he's got, he has 1,707 touchdowns as well. And then you factor in the yards he had as a punt and kick returner, he had 2,279 yards and 5 touchdowns on 213 punt returns in Tampa Bay. He played 8 years, and he was that return specialist and averaged 10.7 yards per punt return. That's damn good. And then you factor in the kick returns, and he had like a long of 63. Again, he didn't have a touchdown. That was Michael Spurlock territory, but 55 kick returns for 1,227 yards. You add it all up, you're looking at 3,500. 4,500, you're over 5,200 total yards worth of offense and special teams yardage from Carl the Truth Williams. That really makes him quite the weapon to have that many yards. I mean, we're talking, that's like all-star type numbers in terms of total yardage and all of that. So Carl the Truth Williams was a bit of a secret weapon, but really could make a huge difference in special teams for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, you mentioned the 5 punt return touchdowns that he had for the Bucs in 96. He won each season, 96, 97, 2000, 2001, and 2002 as well. Also, that Super Bowl that the Bucs won, their first one in franchise history, obviously was dominated a lot by the defense. They had a zillion turnovers, so there really weren't many opportunities for him to get the football either on kick return or punt return. He did have 1 punt return in the game, and it went for 25 yards, which is a really good, which is a really good punt return. So, for the Bucs that haven't really, obviously, special teams from a kicking and punting standpoint has been fantastic, but in terms of the return game, they haven't really found the right player in their wheelhouse just yet, really, since like him and Spurlock. So, hey, if you want to improve in all areas, they got a new special teams coach this year as well. A lot of new coaches, especially on offense and special teams. Why not go with a player that could be an immediate upgrade?
Yep. And last but not least, our featured player right there, Mike Allstott, the A-Train. Well, if you need the ground game to get some improvement, this is a guy that could do it. Second leading rusher in team history behind only James Wilder. That was a guy that we considered as well. But you're talking about touchdowns, a guy that could catch the ball, and also to a player that really got fans out of their seats. I mean, he would make some of the most incredible 3-yard runs. But on 3rd and 1, you need those incredible 3-yard runs to keep moving the chains. The Allstott machine was just in full effect, just wrecked people on a regular basis. And I think he would bring a lot of the physicality that would just, I think, energize this Bucs offense even more. Great vision, underrated vision, slippery tackle breaker. And you know what? As much as James Wilder would have been a great selection as well, he's a little bit like Rachaad White. So we want with a bit of a different contrast here. Plus, if you want a goal line back, if you want a blocking back, which is not really in Liam Cohen's wheelhouse as an offensive scheme, but he gives you that versatility too.
Right, and the fullback isn't used as much in today's NFL, but I would be fine with the A train also just lining up at running back, which he did from
Yes.
time to time with the Bucks anyway. And I think it's so cool the impact that Mike Allstott leaves on today's NFL. Maybe not necessarily from a style standpoint, but you see Kyle Brandt always hyping up Kyle Brandt from Good Morning Football,
Yeah,
always hyping up Mike Allstott. I mean, he's pretty much the originator of angry runs.
that's
NFL
right.
accounts every single year will just post Mike Allstott running highlights, and it's
Yep.
like the most viewed video in the NFL, more than like highlights from the most recent season
Right.
that went on. So his style of play is still remembered by old NFL fans and newer NFL fans that maybe weren't even alive like when he was playing football, and it just shows the legacy that he left as a runner. And now on this current team, I love the idea of either starting Allstott and he just wears down the defense, the
Yeah.
defensive line, the linebackers over and over. And then you move to Rashad White and Bucky Irving. And I could see a situation where there is a 3 running back rotation and
Yeah.
they all get their due. Or you start with Rashad White and Bucky Irving.
Right.
The team naturally is just tired because you're playing a whole game. And then wham, here comes Mike Allstott just dominating and depleting and annihilating everybody in front of him.
Yeah.
And as you said, the short yardage downs, which has been an issue for the Bucs.
That's right.
I think they get cleaned up very, very quickly. Because even if a rookie Graham Barton misses a block, Allstott shakes off that tackle at the line of scrimmage and still gets the 1 yard. So yeah, he would be super helpful for the team immediately, whether he's playing fullback or running back.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We really appreciate the super chats as always. And Realtor David Zussman has one for $4.99. Any word if the Bucs are pursuing an agreement with Connor Williams, center? Looks like it would be a great way to improve our offensive line to Super Bowl level. I wrote about this on Monday in the Bucs mailbag, and it really just depends on how that knee shakes out. I know that right now, Drew Rosenhaus's agent is putting it out there that he's healthy and ready to go. But you know what? Until team physicians check out the free agent center, that's just all talk right now. And so maybe the Bucs do their due diligence. We'll see. Here's the thing. If I'm Connor Williams, I don't take a cheap 1-year deal. I think that's a huge risk. I would much rather sit out the season, be completely healthy, rather than risk playing on a cheap 1-year deal, not putting good film out there, rushing back too soon, maybe having, that knee re-injured because you came back too quickly. Again, that it was a late season injury, I believe on Monday night. And so I don't know, to keep the value, if I'm Connor Williams, I sit out the season if I'm not totally 100% ready to go. And we'll see. Bucs might do their due diligence. They're on vacation right now. So I've been probing a couple members of the Bucs front office, even about Tristan Wirfs. And they're like, nope, we're on vacation. We're not doing anything until the week of training camp. So don't expect any Tristan Wirfs news. At the earliest would be the week of training camp, which is that, third week of July, fourth week of July. So we'll see. But maybe they kick the tires on him. Maybe not. But we appreciate the super chat, Dave.
Yeah, we spoke about it a week or two ago about the situation. It makes more sense for Williams to sit out versus, I mean, if he wants to play for the Bucs, I think the Bucs will say, yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
And then they'll figure out like how healthy he is. And if
It have to
anything,
be
he's
for
a
the
great
right
depth
price.
piece. Right. For sure. For the right price. But again, he's getting a small deal because it's so late into training camp. There's no more big free agent signings at this
point. A lot of
There's
teams don't have any salary cap room either. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, exactly. So it's better for him because he could still be a hot commodity next year when there's an offensive lineman available. So, appreciate it though. But yeah, we got a big show coming up tomorrow as well. Bucs sack projections for 2024. It'll be myself and Josh Capo. Josh went through several projections for pretty much almost every Bucs defender. So we'll break that all down. And then with training camp coming up soon, Thursday's show will be dedicated to talking about potential sleepers that you should be keeping an eye out for the Bucs heading into training camp and this season. So in the meantime, as this show wraps up, make sure you follow us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram at Pewter Report. And our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV, where we got the podcast, Pewter Pulses, various clips and videos, and more to come, especially with training camp coming up. And Drake Westfall, very excited for Josh tomorrow. Says, Josh, can't wait for that show tomorrow. We can't wait as well. Going to be a lot of fun. So that's going to do it for us on today's show. For Scott Reynolds, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.